You've probably seen the news, React 19 is coming. So last month on the React Dev website, we got this article talking about what React has been working on. And there has been a couple of features from the React compiler to actions and the rest. And all of these features are leading to the next major version of React, which is going to be React 19. There are a couple of exciting features in this version, but some of the APIs are going to be changing in how you use them. And a good summary of that can be seen in this tweet by Andrew. Andrew is from the React.js core team. In this video, I want to talk about 4 of these major changes with examples. So let's start from the React compiler. One of the things that will be changing is that you would no longer need useMemo, useCallback, and memo. These are features of React that you would use for manual optimization of components to avoid re-rendering, but all of this will be handled by the React compiler. So here I have this simple example where we have a count state, is logged in state, and a query state. Here I have this large object where I loop through data. Let's just say data is coming from somewhere. I filter through data to check what item matches this query. Well, actually this should be large array, and then I have this callback function which does something. So let's quickly talk about useMemo. In this large array, I loop through this data to find the items that matches the query, right? But even when this query stays the same, this line is always going to run. And why is that the case? Well, as you already know in React, when you update state, everything in that component is run again. So this array would be created again. This callback function will be defined again, and then we have a re-render on the DOM with the new state. So even when you change the count state, this array is still going to be run again. Now if this was a simple array, that wouldn't be a problem, but if you have to loop through a huge data which can be expensive to run, in that case you would want to optimize this, and an optimization approach here could be only run this line when the query changes. And in that case you can use useMemo, and then we can pass what the dependency would be. So here we depend on just query. So the first time this component is run, this callback function is going to run, and whatever is returned from this callback function will be assigned to large array. But this is not going to run anymore until the query changes. In that sense, you have optimized this component to be faster because this expensive line is only running when it needs to run. But then there is also the memo function, and the memo function allows you to avoid re-rendering a component if the props does not change. An example here could be we have display count here, but now when a state changes in this component, everything in the component will be run and re-rendered again, and that means that display count is going to be rendered again. Now display count only receives the count prop. So in the case that the count state changes, then we would expect display count to be rendered again. But what if is logged in changes or query changes? In that case, we wouldn't want display count to be re-rendered. Now display count in our case is a simple component, but imagine it was an expensive component. You would also want to optimize that so that that component is only re-rendered when it actually needs to be re-rendered. Now to achieve that optimization, we can use the memo function. Here I can use the memo function from React and I can pass display count. Here I can now use display count memo. By using this memo function, we get a memoized version of this component assigned to this. So now when we use it here, we know that this component would only be re-rendered when the count state changes. Another optimization is useCallback. Well, we have already used useMemo to avoid recomputing this array unless we need to, but this function would also be redefined. And let's say we're using this function in display count memo. Let's say we have a callback prop and we pass that function here. If you are using the memo function here, because this function reference changes in every render, this component will always be re-rendered even if the count state doesn't change and even if the callback function is the same. So with useCallback, we can memoize the reference to this function so that this function is only redefined when certain dependencies change. And then here we can pass our dependencies. Let's say this depends on is logged in, and this component would only be run return when this function reference changes or when this count state changes. This is manual optimization that you would do with the current APIs in React, but in React 19 with the React compiler, you would not need to do all of these manual optimizations anymore. Instead, React is going to help you with all of these optimizations along with many other optimizations that the React compiler feels is necessary. So that would definitely make our code much cleaner. We don't have to import all of these things and have all of these use wrappers, use callback wrapper. So that's one of the changes React compiler. Well, let's look at another change, which is forwardRef. So I have this component here, forwardRef, and when working in React, you can pass refs to DOM elements. So yeah, I have a button ref, and then I pass this ref to the ref attribute of the button element, and then I can do anything I want with this button element, just like you would do if you are using document.getElements by ID. But then what if this ref is not coming from this component, but I want it to come from this parent component? Well, if I should take this from here now and put it here, and then let's say I pass it as a ref to custom button, and then here I receive the ref and I pass the ref like this in the custom button, well, I'm going to get an error. Custom button ref is not a prop. Trying to access it will result in undefined being returned. So when you want to pass ref to a DOM element, it works fine. But when you want to pass ref to a custom component, that is not going to work until you use the forwardRef from React. So this is going to return this component to this variable, and then this custom button component is going to receive two parameters. So it's going to receive props and it's going to receive ref. I can, as usual, destructure the props. So I have my children prop, but then this ref is going to be the second argument forwarded from here, which I can then use here. And then coming here, instead of using custom button, I'm now going to use the custom button with ref component. And if I go to my console, I no longer have errors. So you can see how easy it was to use ref with DOM elements, but when I wanted to use ref with a custom component, I had to wrap it again with forwardRef. Well, with React 19 coming, the idea is that you will no longer need to use forwardRef. So you can just use your custom button like this, pass your ref as a regular prop, just the way you pass other props in your component, and you'll be able to destructure the ref in the props here, and then you can pass that ref to a DOM element. No need for wrapping with forwardRef. Again, it will make your code easier to write, and we'll be having less of wrapping your components with forwardRef. And for the remaining two changes I want to show you in this video, they are related to the Context API. With React Context, you can easily share data between multiple components, and you can manage that data from a central place, similar to the concept of global state management. So to use the Context API, there are a few functions available for you to do that. So first you create your context, and then here I have my Context.Provider, and I want this to provide these values to all of the children under this provider. So if I have multiple children, they will all have access to this context value. And here in consumer components, I can use the useContext hook to get the data available in my context. And this is how you do it in the current API, but with React 19 coming, there's going to be a use hook, just use. And this hook is pretty versatile from what I read. One of the ways in which you can use this use hook is that instead of having use context and then my context, you can just say use my context, and that is going to work fine. Like I said, the use hook is versatile. You can also use it with promises, and I think a few other things which we're going to be learning more about as we see more React documentation. And then for the fourth major change I wanted to talk about, instead of having my Context.Provider, you can just have it as my context, and that would work fine. So with the current API, you need to have my Context.Provider, and then you specify the values that you want to be accessible for the children components. But with React 19 coming, well, we don't need to use .provider anymore. You can just use my context and it's still going to work fine. And again, this makes your React code cleaner. React is doing a lot of these things internally, especially with the React compiler, doing automatic optimizations for us in different places, so we don't don't have to worry about manual optimizations anymore. Let me know in the comments what your most exciting React 19 feature is. And as well, I have a React course where I simplify different topics in React. You should see the course somewhere on the screen. You can check it out. And please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Also give it a like and share with others.